From Geppetto Studios in New Freedom, Pennsylvania, welcome to the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast, your home for inclusive, positive geek culture, where we talk about movies, comics, music, books, and whatever else we feel like. Please welcome your host.
I mailed him socks.
Somebody sending you socks? I was like, yeah.
Brad Mendenhall.
Hey kids, it is episode 247 of the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast. Very excited to have Kyle Crane from Ghostbusters Minute and Ray Esposito, a producer for the excellent documentary Ghost Heads, together for the first time to talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife. They are two of my favorites, and I have wanted to have them on the same show for years. Anywho, let's get to it. I'm very excited because this is a combination of guests that I have been wanting to put together literally for years. From the beloved Ghostbusters Minute podcast, we have my friend, geez, it's been so long since you've been on, Kyle Crane. Kyle, how you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me on today. This is going to be a lot of fun to talk about, and yes, it's been too long, so I'm honored to be here this evening.
Also joining us, I think you could say comfortably a Ghostbusters fan.
A little bit.
Producer of the movie Ghost Heads, as well as other excellent documentaries, Bill Murray stories, Waldo on Weed, a heck of a great guy, and so happy to have him back, Ray Esposito. Ray, how are you?
Hey, Brad. Thanks for having me on. Kyle, nice to meet you. We just talked a little bit before, but I'm a huge fan of your podcast, your Ghostbusters Minute podcast. I love it.
Thank you.
So this is really cool to be on with you guys. And Brad, I'm so glad to be chatting with you about all things Ghostbusters. So
I've been waiting so long to have you guys on to talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Yes.
When was the original release date supposed to be?
I think it was like June or July of last summer, right?
Yeah, it was right around the time we had my daughter March 12th, which was of 2020, right before COVID went crazy, and they delayed the movie. It was supposed to be out in like June or July that summer. So yeah, it's been essentially over a year and a half.
And then it was delayed multiple times after they announced when it was, and I think they probably picked the right weekend, considering it was right there on Thanksgiving weekend. So ultimately I think the last time they moved it back like 2 weeks or something like that.
It was originally supposed to come out in the beginning of November, right?
Yeah, November 12th. And then it ultimately came out November 19th. And it looks like financially, as we're recording this podcast, I think a pretty sound decision, because it looks like we're in the black now as far as it goes.
I checked before we got on, and it was 115 mil worldwide. So on a budget of 75 million, they are definitely in the black. And this thing is going to have legs with the families and Thanksgiving, and until Spider-Man comes out, I feel like Ghostbusters Afterlife is going to do really well. So
yeah,
people are liking it, which is really nice because it didn't get a lot of critical love. I saw some angry reviews about this movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very weird.
Very, very kind of Last Jedi in reverse feeling, I think, with a lot of it. Like critically reviled, and then, not to say that all the Star Wars fans hated The Last Jedi. Of course, there's a large contingent that really liked it, but it seems that critically this thing, like you're saying, Brad, just completely dogged. Fans really seem to be embracing it.
Very much.
I got back to my house 20 minutes ago from seeing the movie in theaters.
Oh,
wow.
This is fresh in my mind. Family trip. My kid's first time in a movie theater in 2 years. By the way, that's exciting because
wow,
my kids are, I have an 11-year-old who's going to be turning 12 in a couple weeks, and my twins are 9. They sort of forgot how to behave in movie theaters. They weren't bad by any stretch, but they forgot to whisper. There was some spilled popcorn.
So like any other adult that's at the theater. Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
That's exactly how it was when I saw Afterlife. I was throwing things. I was falling up and down the stairs, so I totally get it.
I like the movie. I can understand not liking the movie. It's one of those movies where it hit all the right chords for me, but I understand maybe it's not for everybody. I wish I could remember who wrote the review, but just one reviewer was just really ticked off that this movie existed and thought it was cynical and a cash grab and all that stuff. I don't get it. I don't get the anger. It wasn't a badly acted or badly directed or like especially poorly written movie. Like, this isn't The Room.
I think part of it is, I think that was the Rolling Stone interview you were referring to. The guy who reviewed it for Rolling Stone, his name is escaping me right now. He shredded it. Like, and I understand some of the people's logic behind it, and like then they bring in the 2016 Answer the Call thing. It's like, this is different. Like, we could have a whole podcast probably just about the reviews for this movie.
Answer the Call, a lot of fandom turned against it. I thought the reviews for Answer the Call were pretty good. Not glowing by any stretch.
They were better for Answer the Call than they were for Afterlife. Some, like, if you go by Rotten Tomatoes and the tomato meter, however you review movies, but Answer the Call essentially from critics was ranked a little higher than Afterlife.
What about this movie just ticked critics off so much?
Yeah, so some of the reviews that I read were kind of like, I feel there's a lot of general society feelings on the constant churning of reboots and just going back to franchises from the 80s and the 90s and stuff like that is just kind of the stagnation. I think they were projecting a lot of the general feelings about that onto this film. I don't feel that this film is reflective of that in any way. So I can kind of, and I would agree with a lot of their critics on the idea that we do need to get new stuff out there, that we can't continue to just live in this constant kind of like bringing back up of the things that, hey, remember this thing you loved when you were a kid? Now it's time to pass that on to the next kid. And there's some cynicism in that to say like, hey, you love Transformers, right? Well, why don't you get your kid to buy the same toys that you bought when you were younger? This isn't that movie though. I don't see anything in this movie that was really trying to push that directly. It's completely tonally different from the first film. I'll say this. We did a review on Ghostbusters Minute of Afterlife, and I did it with our friend Dave Pallas, who is we really love the movie as well. And that is my feeling. I came out of this really enjoying it. Yes, this movie shows you physical objects that you have seen in the past. There are ghost traps in it. There are proton packs in it. But there is a level of discovery in this film that really is about someone finding out something about themselves, about their familial history, kind of like trying to figure out what came before them when they're cut off from that. That has never been done in a Ghostbusters movie before. Ghostbusters 2, to me, is far more cynical because it comes from the 90s vein of sequel making, which was just, what did we do in the first movie? At page 15, thing X happened. On page 30, this thing happened. And the 3-act structure is pretty much the exact same thing, to the point that we have a giant figure walking around at the end of the film, just like you did in the first one. So it's actually trying to give you the same visual cues that you had in the first movie. That does not run the course for the entirety of Ghostbusters Afterlife because, yes, the third act of this movie does borrow extremely heavily from the first film. So that's when I can kind of agree with some of the critics on what they're taking from that there. 85% of this movie worked for me just gangbusters because it was something I hadn't seen before. Tonally, it was different from Ghostbusters, either the two films that had come out or Answer the Call. But I do kind of feel that as you're leaving this film, it does kind of stumble a little bit in some unearned plot points that come up. And I don't know how far we want to get into spoilers just yet. But at the same time, that stumbling at the end did not ruin the other like 65 minutes or whatever it was that preceded it. In fact, I kind of fell in love with that whole Amblin style kids discovering stuff and going on an adventure type thing, because for the Ghostbusters world, it was new. I feel like it expanded on the mythology, and really it's everything I kind of like want from a sequel of that 85% of the movie that is. So as far as like where that comes from, I'm assuming that some critics are just jaded, man. Like everything for them right now is, especially we get into the fourth quarter of the year. This is usually when all the the Oscar bait films start coming out. And I think a lot of them are ready to start just watching A24 film after A24 film going into getting ready for their Oscar nomination stuff. Yeah, a lot of it has been up until this point Fast and the Furious 9, like the fourth or fifth Marvel movie that's coming out this year. Oh, what is this? Another franchise continuation? And I think this just hit at the wrong time for a lot of people in the critic world. But as we said, it's not reflective of the audience's score. Right now on Rotten Tomatoes, 63% with critics, 95% with audiences. There was something that really hit with the general public for this film, which is really all that matters. And I do feel we're talking about the movie just being in black this weekend, if they are going to start talking about a direct sequel to it at some point, I feel that we've got the familiar stuff out of the way with this movie to a little degree. We could have another Ghostbusters movie after this that really does try to push into some new territory within the confines of a horror comedy genre. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. That I think this was the breaking point for a lot of critics, and I think this movie is just the whipping boy for that.
recycling IPs it really is a snake eating its own tail. Talking just a few weeks before the next Spider-Man movie where, wow, not only do you have the new Spider-Man franchise, but they're bringing in all these characters from other Spider-Man franchises, and they're getting so meta with it, which is something similar that they're doing in the DC universe where Michael Keaton and whoever else from the Batman franchise is showing up in the Flash movie. So I get it. I get critics being frustrated, but I think that would be so much better suited for a think piece about the state of movies in general instead of hammering this one particular movie that is a good movie with good acting. Again, I understand if you don't like it because those tonal differences from the original movie where the first Ghostbusters was improv heavy. You had these great comedic actors, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis at their peak, doing just some great mugging for the camera. The kids in this movie are not doing that at all.
Right.
So I get that, but trashing this like, again, this is The Room or Birdemic or something like that just seems so, to me, it hurts the credibility of the reviewer because it just seems like they come in with an axe to grind.
Now, first off, Brett, are you telling me that you want a crossover with Ghostbusters and Answer the Call? Do you want to combine those worlds? Are we getting into that? Is that what we're thinking? Are we going to make a crossover like a super meta Ghostbusters, combining all the Ghostbusters? Because I know they've been... No, I'm kidding.
Wasn't there some talk of that?
I'm sure they talked about it. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm sure they were like, listen, I know they wanted to get the Ghost Corps, who is, runs the division with all the Ghostbusters movies and TV shows and whatever else they're working on. I feel like at one point there had to be a conversation where they were like, we mentioned Gozer at the end of Answer the Call and brought this movie. So I guarantee there was some kind of at least a conversation about it, but I know that it was mostly panned by critics. So it's like, I know they were trying to kind of get away from that a little bit. And obviously this movie in canon with the other two Ghostbuster films.
Like, one problem with Answer the Call is, and that you can get around this very easily, but they did use Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson were in that movie as different characters. You get a clever enough writer, or even just a bad writer, and you don't give a crap, and you can make anything happen. What was it? There's a meme that's been going around about people who are questioning their abilities as a writer, and I'm paraphrasing. If you ever question yourself as a screenwriter, just remember that somebody was paid millions of dollars by one of the biggest companies in the world to tie up one of the greatest franchises ever, and said, somehow Palpatine is alive. And they just went with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. That was just me kind of making a joke, but I really think that, yeah, I loved it. I saw the movie and I agree with Kyle. Like, I thought it was really well done. I thought it was smart and funny, and the kids were really fantastic. And yeah, the end of it kind of just happens. It's kind of, maybe what's coming because but it's like, in my eyes, there was like, how else would you have made a Ghostbusters 3 or a Ghost without Harold Ramis? Like, that was the main thing. Like, their main thing was like, how are we going to make a movie without one of the lead guys? And what do? You have to involve him in the way that they did, which I thought was very tastefully done. How far do you want to get into spoilers here, Brad?
Spoil the heck out of it.
Okay, because I don't know. I posted something on my my Ghostbusters fan page that I run. I posted a picture and people lost their minds because they thought it was a spoiler, and it got ugly. And it was all pure, like, it was an official image that was released from Vanity Fair I shared on my page. But anyway, so spoiler wise, yeah, like, I thought they did a really tasteful, fantastic job involving Harold Ramis's family and getting him involved in the capacity that they did. They had his ghost kind of show up in the end and help out, which I thought was very, very well done. But overall, I thought the movie was good, and I did get a feeling of Goonies, and that feeling when I was a kid again, like just seeing the guys on screen and their faces light up, and like how like Bill Murray did the thing where he was messing around a little bit with the lines, I feel like. So I really dug it, and like McKenna Grace was fantastic, Logan Kim was amazing, like the cast was, like, Jason Reitman did a fantastic job of putting this together, paying homage to the original Ghostbusters movies. And I know people are freaking out because Ghostbusters 2 oh, wasn't in it that much, but like he was at Raise a Cult. It's canon. He said it can't, like, come on, everybody, we're good. And they're upset about the video game not being involved. It's like, but guys, that's like a video game. Like, come on, we're lucky we're even seeing this right now. Like, it's been 32 years. So in my head, I couldn't imagine another way to do it. I'm sure there's other ways, but this is the way they did it, and I feel like I'm fine with that. And I really dug the movie a lot.
Yeah, and it really that ending you're talking about where and since we're in full spoilers here, when Harold Ramis does show up as a ghost at the end, I didn't tear up in the movie. I'm not going to insult anybody who did. If you felt that emotionally, that's
I did. I cried 3 times. So, and you're not insulting me. I was weeping.
Then it worked, and that was what they were going for. And I didn't feel that it was emotionally manipulative. It felt like closure, and it felt like the message of this movie, I don't know if this was really explicit in the text or not, is kind of like, when you have the opportunity to tell someone while they're alive that you love them, you need to take that chance and do that.
That's exactly what I was like. I lost my dad when I was 16, and I knew going into this that this was going to be a super heavy movie. It's called Ghostbusters Afterlife. Harold Ramis passed away. It doesn't, like, I knew something was coming in regards to that. I didn't know they were going to go as kind of hard as they did into the actual getting somebody to play Harold Ramis and doing that whole thing. I thought it was going to be some kind of a homage or something. Maybe they just show the ghost of him helping out, but not him, like they kind of started in the beginning where he was playing chess. I thought it was gonna be like that. Then for him to kind of show up at the end, I just lost it because I was like, oh man, that was me and my dad, or I wish I could see this with my dad. And I feel like that's Jason and Ivan, their relationship in terms of like father and son. It's just that parental child relationship, grandchild relationship. That's something, like, I have 4 kids. I wish my kids could have had that with, like, to say goodbye to in that way. So I totally get what you're saying. It's a really good point of how Jason played that.
Yeah, and I feel like there's also some meta-contextual there going on with the relationship between Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, which famously fell apart after Groundhog's Day. And, there's that line that Winston says, like, I miss you, my friend. And I think that more than anything else in the movie, that really hit me.
I agree.
Yeah, and it was really a beautiful ending, I think, in this mainstream studio-made film that was for all audiences out there.
Right, heartfelt. Yeah, you're over here getting this such a heavy heart, like such a big heart. Watching it, I felt the same way. Like, wow, it's Bill Murray saying goodbye to Harold Ramis. Like, I know he had his little moment at the Oscars when he was kind of like, he mentioned Harold Ramis's name and he got a little emotional, and that was really cool. But knowing how it was from Groundhog's Day and they had the big falling out, right? Then seeing that moment, which was like a small moment, then knowing they buried the hatchet, and then seeing this, it felt like it was like, I know they played it like Violet Steele, Harold's daughter, said that she felt like they really played up on Egon and not Harold. They were really focusing on Egon. Like, he looked like Egon because he didn't look like how Harold Ramis looked towards the end of his life, right? And she was like, wow, like they really played it up with Egon. But I felt like watching Murray, they were all saying goodbye to Harold. And that was like, you're right, that moment when Winston said, I miss you, I was just like, oh, guys, this is like, it's so well done. Like, I really thought it was. And I thought that moment was earned. A lot of people are like, well, they were fan pandering, but I felt like those moments towards the end, sure, there were some plot holes that you could talk about, but really, I felt like that was a very earned ending with the original guys reuniting with Harold. It was very, very good.
I don't think a Ghostbusters movie needs to have this ironclad plot.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you watch the first 2 movies, you could find plot holes because they were bit heavy movies. If these movies are fun, and this movie was fun, and what it did, that there was things that obviously the original movie did better, but what this movie had, it had a little more emotional impact.
It's 2021. It's 2020. Like, it's been an emotional 2 years. And I know they started filming this before COVID, but I feel like, yeah, it's just like, it's playing into how people are very, like, social media is a very big thing right now. So, or it's so, like, things like that, where it's like, people are different. They're not like they were in 1984 when the first one's released, right? Things are more accessible on the internet. There's trailers. They didn't have like trailers like this back then. So more about the movie going in. There's all these different things that are playing into it. I think today's kids and teenagers and young adults are way more in touch with their feelings than maybe I was back in the day when I saw this for the first, like, I feel like everything's so out there now. So this was definitely having like more of an emotional impact than than the first two in that way. But also, I think losing Harold was a big part of it, and I think that needed to play into it. And how could you not bring up Harold without being emotional? Like they had to mention Egon, they had to do that. So again, I think they did it in the right way. And I love how Jason says he just saw a girl standing in a field one day with a proton pack, and it kind of really, really kudos to him and the cast and crew. They worked really hard. You could tell with all the practical effects and all that stuff. They really busted their butts on this show.
That's something else that maybe another point I want to jump onto after that. So walking out of here, there were two things that it was the emotional impact coming out of it that I actually felt and was like, okay, that's different. I haven't seen that in a Ghostbusters movie before. I like that. The other thing that was in my mind was, oh my God, if I could buy stock in an actor's career, I would go all in on McKenna Grace like right now.
100%. I got out of there and I was like, and I've seen her in a couple of other things. I know she's been in Captain Marvel. She's been in, she played young Tanya Harding. She's got a really good budding career, right? She has all these fantastic roles. This was her first lead role in like a big budget film, and she crushed it. I was like, she did little nuances that were like Harold Ramis, as Egon. There was like the dry sense of humor and just how she was on screen. She was fantastic, and I think she's gonna come out of this and she's already out. She's gonna have a big career, I think. So, and she deserves it. She seems like a really nice kid, and Logan Kim was great too. Logan Kimchi is his Instagram handle. That's why I called him that. But Logan Kim, he was this was his first movie, and his comedic timing was impeccable. He was fantastic too.
Yeah, it really kind of a great modern take on the Ray type character, and really kind of seemed ahead of his age as far as his ability to do kind of the dry wit that was in the original Ghostbusters, the interplay between the two of them.
I felt like you just said he was like a young Dan Aykroyd. I feel like him. Did you feel like he was passing the torch when Ray said to him at the end, like, "Oh, what's your podcast?" Like, I thought that was like a little bit of a passing the torch moment, because I felt like he was a little bit of a Ray character myself too.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's kind of the thing with this movie as far as characters go. It's clearly McKenna Grace is the Egon, podcast is the Ray character. We didn't really get enough to see Lucky to really say like where she fits in. And the one character that you're kind of missing from that is the modern Peter Venkman, and that's okay because the Peter Venkman character is a relic of the 80s. You're not going to get any Thorazine jokes with zillennials going forward,
You don't think so? You don't think in the next one she's going to talk about drugging somebody? I think that'd be interesting.
Oh, I hope not. I really hope not.
But you're right. You're right.
Thank God he was played by Bill Murray, because we just want to give Bill Murray a pass on everything.
I know there are some things from the 80s that obviously, but you're right. He's a relic of the 80s, but I feel like you mentioned earlier when you were talking about there's some plot points they used that were from the first one, right? But I was just thinking about that tonight, really, before this podcast. I think that they could go and now that they've set it all up, the second movie, which I'm assuming they're going to green light because this is doing really well. I feel like they got something here, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a ghost head or whatever. But I feel like they could go in any direction they want to, and they should. They shouldn't rehash Vigo. Maybe like a little cameo of a paint, but they don't need to go into the same storylines of other things. I think they can go off into their own direction and build up upon like the end of the movie, that end tag with Winston and Janine talking about that. They are setting it up for another movie, and I feel like that's the thing. You go to New York, you kind of have the young team, maybe they come back. Like there's a lot of different places they can go with this, and I think they really should focus on the fact that they've built this up and they can go anywhere they want, and let's not go back to rehash plot points from another Ghostbusters, which I don't think Jason would do. I think he did this as a kind of a gift to the fans, but he set it up with enough to make it its own thing for a second one.
Yeah, totally. There's a few, I think, hints they drop where they could go with another one, like you're saying there at the end is Winston back at the Hook and Ladder, which was not a Starbucks that they had mentioned earlier in the movie.
Okay, yes, I agree. Yeah, I think it was just a joke but I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. Another one of these could actually have a completely new cast, and that might be okay, because it feels to me like they're possibly expanding it out into, I know they've said this before, they want to do like a connected universe type thing. So you could have Winston going in there and taking a bunch of new people and training them and go off in a new direction there. We also had that moment where they're going across the different times that Gozer had come back, and they mentioned Krakatoa and the Tunguska explosion, and then there's 1945, What happened there? Well, there's your prequel.
Let's go. Let's get a little period piece Ghostbusters film.
Totally. Ghostbusters fighting the occult Nazis or something, and you wouldn't have to have traps or proton packs. You could.
Don't tease me, Kyle. That would be like the Indiana Jones of Ghostbuster movies. Just a proton pack to the face of a Nazi would be great.
You love to see it. Yeah.
But you're right, though. That's a really great callback right there. They could do that too.
You could see what they sort of did this a little bit with the Jurassic Park series, where they weren't worried about using the same cast movie after movie. So you had the first one where you had a great cast, and then the second Jurassic World where it was, okay, Jeff Goldblum, you have a cameo from one or two of the other actors, but you hold a whole different cast. And then the third, all of a sudden, no Jeff Goldblum, but you bring back Grant. And don't worry about bringing everyone back if it doesn't work, because it could be a little tricky having all these kids in another movie and putting them in the same sort of danger.
It could, but I feel like I love the characters, and I would love to see if Lucky and Trevor maybe become something. Or I loved McKenna Grace and Logan Kim's characters, and I want to see where they could go. Like the two of them, like as friends, like the whole lab partner thing was just a really great bit. But it's like maybe that delves into like maybe they go back to New York and they help out with the Ghostbusters. Like she was very adamant, Phoebe's character, like Grandpa was a Ghostbuster and I'm a scientist, like, and she's a super scientist. So seeing her involved in some way, I would love to see. On the other hand, I could also see them being like starting a Ghostbusters Incorporated thing with Winston funding it because he's this wealthy businessman now. So like they have these different directions they could go in, and I'd be very curious to see what that looks like. But I like the idea that we're talking about this, and we're over here having conversations about what does a Ghostbusters 4 look like? Like that's something I didn't think we were going to have 4 years ago.
Ray, I remember having you on this show because we were so shocked when they did that first little teaser ad with Ecto 1 license plate displaying ever so briefly in that music cue. I was like, what?
That was January of 19 when they announced it, and they were like, hey, we're making new Ghostbusters. By the way, here's a trailer. I was like, what's happening right now? I like literally was so shocked.
It was weird too, because I think that trailer might have even dropped on not even an official YouTube, like not a Sony channel or something.
Yeah, it just popped up, and I was like, is this real?
I was like, is this like a fan thing or something? And then I was like, oh no, oh wow, okay.
I think it was on Entertainment Weekly. They had the lead on it. So it's
yeah.
like they released it, and then the trailer came out, and I was like, I was just shocked, and I was like, okay, I mean, I understood. I was like, okay, they're making like another one. This is great. But we knew nothing about it. Like, why is Ecto in a barn? People went nuts. There's slime. Why is Ecto in a barn? Why does it look like it's disheveled? And then you start putting your own things together. Oh, I remember that moment. I was just like, all right, this is, use the same music. And then of course we have all the delays, which were so difficult. Like, and I get it. Like there's still places it hasn't come out yet. On my page, there's people in Australia who are upset, and they're like, oh, we just want to see it. This is the pandemic really has changed the movie industry altogether. But the delays were like, I knew it would be worth it in the end, and I thought the wait was worth it for me personally. Like I thought it was worth the wait for me. Difficult, but great.
The previous movie, Answer the Call, starring Melissa McCarthy and directed by Paul Feig, ran into a lot of problems because it did okay, not great. And then it lost a lot of money because it wasn't able to show in China because
they're very strict on their rules about showing the paranormal in their films. Yeah.
Have they been able to figure out a way around that with Afterlife, or is this not showing there either?
I don't think I've even heard about it showing there. Yeah.
I haven't either. Yeah. I feel like they were trying to get it to show there because obviously, the Chinese film market it's bigger than America's film market right now, essentially. And they make these big pushes for Fast, Furious, and 9 and all these films. But yeah, I haven't heard anything about it. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be great if it came out there, but I don't know.
So I'm looking just real quick. I just pulled up Box Office Mojo, and it looks like, at least in Hong Kong, it has opened, and it made $334,000 since November 18th. I don't know about mainland China. I don't have anything else on it. So it looks like it's at least out in Hong Kong right now. But, I don't know, honestly, the difference between what China gets to say goes on in Hong Kong. So
right, yeah, the rules. But the bottom line is it's financially it's doing fantastic even without China. Like they're up past 100 million. I'm assuming they're in the black. I don't know what their marketing budget was. I'm obviously they put a bunch of money into it. But Ghost Corp and Sony has to be happy with the performance. Like their initial expectations were like 32 million or something, and it ended up making 44. So it went over what they predicted, and now it just finished. Essentially, it looks like it's going to finish in second place. and it's going to be past 100 million. Like they have to be happy with how it's performing right now, no question.
And the goalposts have been moved a little bit because of COVID too. So even in the COVID world, I mean, this isn't Shang-Chi or anything, but it's still very good.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like this isn't performing upwards of No Time to Die here, but I feel like with COVID, you have to they were making a huge push for cinema release, which I understand seeing it now, and I knew going in like that was the right call for it. While it was a difficult call, Sony is essentially the only company that doesn't really have a streaming service. They've been kind of selling their movies to like Amazon and Hulu and all that. So, part of me thought initially, oh, maybe they'll release it on Amazon, or they'll release, and seeing it in the theater, I think it made the difference. Like it was just such a spectacle. It was so good to see on the big screen,
I want to get your guys' opinion. One thing that really shocked me, and it was really, I thought it was very clever. You have Ivo Shandor character who has been mentioned in the video game, and there's been mentions of Ivo in the past. They had a creepy scene where he realizes that he's been dead forever long, but he's not really dead. And then he's alive and he's talking, and it's J.K. Simmons.
Yeah.
I think that was great. Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, wow. So really we're going to see Evo and J.K. Simmons. And it's like, oh, he's ripped in half. Never mind.
Yeah. I think there was more to that scene. I think they shot more for that. I think that was, there's definitely some plot holes. I don't know if you want to go into plot holes or things that maybe, I only have really one gripe with the film. One kind of thing where I was like, it was like a little bit of a bummer to me, but I kind of justified it by saying like they couldn't have done it any other way, which was how Ray kind of reacted to Egon, with him saying like Egon Spangler can burn in hell, and like we didn't believe him. It's like, well, we're ready to believe you is like their main thing, right? Like they believe anything. Like Ray's the one who believes all this stuff, so for him to not believe Egon, I get that it was kind of a driving point because Harold wasn't there and they kind of had to make it work. I resigned myself to it at the end of the movie. I was like, it worked for me, but that was the only thing that really kind of got me a little bit, was that kind of that piece of the storyline there. Like, so for me, that was the only thing that, I don't know, really kind of bothered me a little bit.
Yeah, the idea that over the course of 10 years, Egon couldn't make himself understood to the other guys. I was like, really? I get that Egon was presented as a little in his head so much.
Yeah.
But really, he couldn't, over the course of 10 years, with his three compatriots who knew him so well, he couldn't figure out a way. He's like, hey, there's some serious stuff going on and you should get down here, and not figure out a way to express that to them in a way that them, knowing how he is, was like, I don't know what's going on, but listen, it's Egon. There's a Twinkie probably involved. Let's get our butts over there.
What do you think, Kyle? Because the other thing too, I think, is really quick, and then I want to hear what Kyle thinks about this, because I think the other thing is like Egon is like super smart, right? He's almost like, he's like, the way his brain works, he's super dry. The way he thinks is super, like, he's a scientist, right? All these things that have been going on, him working with nuclear reactors and all these things, it could have driven him a little bit crazy, right? And that's kind of what I thought into it, even though they didn't show any of that on screen. I felt like maybe that was part of Egon's character, of him kind of going on this goose chase. Oh, Gozer's coming back. I'm going to go. And Ray's like, you can't leave us here, Egon. Like, in my head, I built up this little storyline, even though that wasn't on film.
I think that in like I'm thinking, Ray, that you're correct, and there's got to be something in that third act that there's like maybe 30 minutes cut out of the movie, and it's a 2-hour long movie right now. So like and I want to say Jason Reitman said that he had like an extra year to continue to edit this movie and chop stuff down. And the movie, the flow of it, action wise, is pretty great. Like that's tone and flow, or pacing of a film are two of the most important factors in filmmaking. And I think he really nailed that. But emotionally, it is a little dissatisfying to not see what Ray did on the back end to, number one, learn to believe Egon, and number two, call the other guys, figure out where this little girl was calling from, and trying to get them together. So I don't know if there was some logistical problems in trying to get Bill Murray to shoot on that many days.
He's tough. He's tough.
Yeah, it seemed like they probably shot his stuff in a day or two, like having him there on set. But it is a little dissatisfying at the end of the film when all of a sudden they just show up out of nowhere, and you feel like there's something that was left out there. There's that arc that when you're saying that Ray, their thing that they always said is, we're ready to believe you, and then he doesn't believe Egon. Well, we've got a storyline there where he learns to believe his old friend. And I do know that the way that it conveyed the breakup of the Ghostbusters or Egon leaving. If it's something that was over money, if the guy just all of a sudden liquidates all the assets and leave, that's the kind of thing that is very difficult to get over as far as like trust and stuff goes. That, they say never start a business with your best friend for a reason,
But they didn't talk about that though, and that's why it's like I wish there was a little more like when Phoebe called from the jail, like Ray picking up the phone. He was like Venkman works at the college, and Winston, it's like he kind of gave us the quick. Here's what's happening. Here's the rundown of where everybody is. Egon can burn in hell. I was totally like, that stinks. But here's something else I would pay for. I would 100% pay for a film of Pete, Ray, and Winston taking a road trip to Oklahoma. Like, how did that work out? Like, Phoebe called, Ray's like, they have the conversation, and then he calls the guys. They clearly got to Oklahoma somehow. That's a road trip movie I would pay to see.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we are going to get that still case 4K UHD Blu-ray that's got the scene where he's calling the Venkman household, and then all of a sudden Dana Venkman picks up the phone and is like, "Hey, oh, you looking for him?" And he's out on the golf course or whatever. So I mean, it's possible that stuff exists out there. I guess we'll see in 3 months when it comes out on Blu-ray. But I also would pay to see something like that as well. So that's one of my complaints with the film is that. Emotionally, there is it didn't make me hate the movie, but it does feel like there's a little bit of a cheat or kind of a jump made there at the end.
And I get it. I get why they did it, but that's really my only thing with the film. That everything else I loved.
Well, there was a little bit of a disconnect because, okay, and hey, I'm always all for Annie Potts getting work. But finding out that Janine was still connected to Egon and helping get the bills paid, and then you see she's still connected with Winston. I was like, hey, shouldn't she be talking to people? Like, Egon obviously had enough on the ball to still maintain a healthy relationship with her, and she had a healthy relationship with everyone else. It's like, I get it. It was a great scene, and it was like fun, and the audience did react when she walked in the door. It's like, oh, Annie Potts, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, still no Rick Moranis.
I was just going to tell you what I had heard. I had heard earlier in the script, this is from somebody who, I don't know how close they were to the production, but they originally wanted Lewis to be the executor of Egon's will when Egon's character passes away. Obviously, where do his assets go to his, to Callie, right? So the rumor was that they were trying to get Rick Moranis for a cameo as Lewis, who like meets them at the farmhouse, and he's like, well, this is what's going on with the house and the assets, like that kind of thing, which I thought would have fit really well into it. But I know Rick Moranis is like, I don't want to just do a cameo, because they had asked him to be in 2016 in the new one there. And I get it. I get why he didn't want to, but I thought that would have been cool. So that's where I heard he was trying to be fit into the new movie.
At some point, somebody he'll be in like an official statement given, or he'll do an interview, because this isn't like Answer the Call. He was still really retired. Moranis is ever so slowly dipping his toe back into public life. He did that Mint Mobile ad, which was really fun. He's going to appear in the Disney Plus Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
And he was on Goldberg's. He had a little thing on Goldberg's. Yep. Voiceover, I think.
I have nothing to base this on. It does feel like there's more to the story now, him not being in this.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think he wants it to be worth it. He's in very high demand. I would imagine people have sent him scripts, and he said I read the big spread they had on him a couple of years ago in I think it was Vanity Fair or Hollywood Reporter. I obviously understand why he left the business, but I think he really looks at these scripts and he's like, if I'm going to come back, I want it to be worth it. I'd love to see him like, hey, Winston, at the end of the movie, Winston said, hey, I started this with one employee. What if that one employee was Louis Tully? Like, why wouldn't it be? He was an accountant. He was working for the Ghostbusters. Winston's off saying, hey, I want to start this kind of business, this whatever business Winston started at the end there. Why couldn't it be Lewis? And maybe he has more of a role in the second one if it works for him. Do you know what I mean? But I don't fault him for, coming back or not being in it or anything.
We tend to, as fans, ask too much. You see that in going back to the new Spider-Man movie. There's a lot of things with the build up to that where there's been a joke. Is like they've already showed they're going to have Electro and Dr. Octopus and William Dafoe, but you still know that people aren't going to be happy until you have, like, if they don't have Holland, Maguire, and Andrew Garfield lined up in like different Spider-Man suits, shooting webs at someone. The people who leave the theater disappointed.
The hype is just it's crazy.
We do want the world. I mean, we got Sigourney Weaver and that amazing post-credit scene.
That was great. Funny. Super funny. I loved it. Made a lot of sense.
They have wedding rings on. They're married. They're happily married, and she's busting his chops and zapping him because he really earned it.
Where's Oscar? If Ghostbusters 2 is canon, Oscar was the subject of the second movie. Like, maybe you get him involved in some capacity, you know?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be cool to bring him into the fold. So who knows?
Yeah, they'll have Chris Pratt. One of the Chris's will show up in the next movie is Oscar.
Only if Chris Pratt voices the Oscar character and somebody else plays him. That's the only way I'll watch it.
Just have some schlubby guy with like Chris Pratt's like hot voice over the whole thing, just smoldering. Yeah,
have me play Oscar, then he could do the voice. It'd be perfect.
What do you guys think is next? Because Ghostbusters is a very interesting IP. I mean, the year it came out, it was It was the first or second biggest movie the year that the first Ghostbusters came out.
It was the highest grossing movie of 84, I believe.
It's always been interesting watching them try to capitalize on that. There's been sequels. They had the one or two animated shows, Real Ghostbusters, and then they did Slimer, and then they had the Extreme Ghostbusters. What's next? We're in a world where the Suicide Squad came out, and 6 months later, they're going to have the Peacemaker show and all the variant ways they can go from things.
I think Ghost Corps know they have one of the most recognizable logos in the world. Like, people see that logo, they know exactly what it is. And I think they're taking the care and consideration to really think about the next step. Like, I feel like they could go into making a TV show. I know a friend of mine made a short film called Ghostbusters South Side. His name is Patrick Lawrence. He made this short film. He was telling me they were going to present it to Ghost Corps as like a possible idea for a spinoff. And so I feel like they have like I was saying, they have a bunch of different avenues they could go to. They could try to make a TV show. They can make another film, which I think they should do. So I don't really know what the future holds for Ghostbusters. I think it's a bright future. There's definitely something on the horizon. I feel like we're going to get an announcement sooner rather than later. I'm very excited to see what Eric Reich, who kind of runs Ghost Corps with Ivan over there at Ghost Corps, I'm very excited to see what they kind of do. So what do you think? I'm very interested to see what you think, Kyle.
I do feel like we're going to hear something before the end of the year. You know, the studios love to do that once they get something that's kind of profitable. And I think the next couple of weeks, they're going to see just how profitable it is.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Where I personally would like to see it. So there's one thing I was thinking when I was watching this movie is kind of like, it's the story they're trying to tell is a little bit too big for the time format. It might work well as a Netflix series or something like that. And like you were saying, Sony doesn't have their own streaming platform and they are kind of subbing their stuff out. Like, where does it go? Does Sony put in half and Netflix or Amazon puts in the other half or something like that? If they're going to tell us a story of, let's say, Winston starting up a new Ghostbusters East Coast and then maybe a West Coast or something like that, or extending the Oklahoma office. You know, I love that line that Venkman says, "Hey, Pete from the home office." You know?
Yeah.
If we are going to get that of like building up other Ghostbusters franchises throughout the country or the globe, because then that'd be great if there was a French version of this or something. That's probably going to be too much story to tell and covering some of the same territory. So I think streaming might be the best way for them to go with a limited 10 episode run of the Ghostbusters UK or something like that. They're fighting Scottish ghosts or something, you know. And
it's not like Venkman hasn't mentioned it in the first movie. He was all about franchising. Like it has always been there. People have always mentioned it. It's like it's built into the storyline. It's not like and Jason has said, "Hey, I want to see Ghostbuster stories from around the world." So he's definitely hinting at it, a bigger picture, you know.
And you could also kind of feed into the meta side of everything, where Ghostbusters works well too when it's a cynical take on something, and they could really cynically kind of like poke fun at the idea of why does everything have to be a franchise now, while extending their own franchise. I think there could be some really good tongue-in-cheek humor there. You know,
they could go super meta on that. Yeah. That's interesting too. It's an interesting take.
I think there's a lot of cool ways they could take it. I just really hope that they really try to do something visually different with the next one. We've seen the traps, we've seen the proton packs and everything. Let's see the next gen version of that. How can we take that and talk about some contemporary issues in that world? Ghostbusters, the original one, was a very libertarian movie. And, how does that mindset work in the current kind of like state of there's a lot of people out there that are into unions, that stands kind of in contrast to where the original Ghostbusters was. So I think there's a lot of fertile ground politically in society that they could take some really funny jabs and stuff and keep the comedic side of the whole thing sharp. But I am very excited with it. And I do think we're probably going to hear something before the end of the year. What that is, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's an interesting take.
Do you think the future of this franchise is tightly tied to Jason Reitman? I know there was the familial connection, but this was a weird movie for Jason Reitman to do. He's never been a big budget director. It was funny when I was watching the first real showpiece, for lack of a better term, action scene where the kids are chasing after him in the car. I was like, it was fine. It worked. It was serviceable, but it wasn't like a dynamic scene. And I was like, okay, he definitely made the early scenes his own. All the stuff of the kids trying to connect with their mom and the mom trying to connect with her father, that was all very Jason Reitman. Also, Reitman was on a little bit of a losing streak because he did the Tully and the Front Runner and Labor Day were the movies he did before this. Tully, I thought, got some pretty good reviews, but wasn't a big moneymaker. Front Runner was Oscar bait, and it didn't work. I'm wondering if Reitman, and yeah, I've seen directors do this, where they do that sort of crowd-pleasing movie, and it gets them out of director's jail.
I don't know. With Jay, I feel like he kind of did what he wanted to do. He made the film. He wanted to make it for the fans. I feel like if he were offered to come back, he would come back. But he has said in interviews, like, I want to see all my friends make Ghostbuster movies, like, get their takes on it. But I think he did a good job with it because, yeah, he's not a big budget movie director. He makes Up in the Air. He's made Tully, all these kind of art house pictures that maybe haven't done huge financial numbers, but have been somewhat critically successful, right? With this, he ventured off into his first car chase. It was his first thing, and I appreciate what he did. I dug it, and I'd be interested to see if he would take it on again and do another one. But I'm also like, hey, if he's kind of like, hey, you know what? I did my Ghostbusters film. This was the idea I had. I'm happy with it. I'm happy seeing another director kind of step in and do it too. So I'd be interested to see what he thinks, like, or what, I guess, essentially what Sony thinks, if they want to keep him on.
Yeah, I mean, having him in the director's chair is kind of a play out of the Marvel book where you already have half of the stuff previs. Well, I know it's a little bit different because Jason Reitman did write the script for this, I believe, along with another writer.
Yes, he did. Gil Kennan.
Marvel will get a director that knows how to work with actors. Chloe Zhao does Nomadland. It's great. Okay, she's going to come in and do the Eternals, and she's going to nail the emotional stuff between these actors, and then doesn't have to worry about the second unit action stuff because that stuff was previs in a computer 3 years ago, and it's they've just been working on the effects for it. This one I think is a little bit different because I think Jason Reitman was more involved in the action scenes and stuff. It would be interesting if they continue that, if they get another person who's good with maybe a business type movie with business personalities or something like that. Okay, the action stuff's already been written. Don't have to worry about that. But I was fully impressed with his take on a mainstream movie. I think he nailed those small character moments where they needed to be. I think the Kenna Grace's entire forget the character's name all of a sudden. Excuse me.
Phoebe.
Thank you. Phoebe's whole journey of finding out who her grandfather was and her lineage and everything, and kind of finding herself through that was really well done. You could feel that his ability to work with a child actor was really, really well done. So I think he made that transition pretty well. And if he decides to just act as a producer and a writer on the next one, and like you said, Ray, have one of his friends direct the next film, I think that's a great move too.
Last question before we start plugging our pluggables. Is there a director you would like to see take the reins?
I've always thought that Ruben Fleischer would be good. He's a super huge Ghostbuster fan. He did the Zombieland movies. He's a huge, giant Ghostbusters fan. I would be interested to see what his take would be now that this movie is done. I know people have pitched Ghostbusters 3. They had the Office writers. They had all these different people who were pitching Ghostbusters 3 movies essentially over the years. But now that this is done, they have to kind of base it off of this, right? So I would love to see, like, if Ruben Fleischer came in to direct one, he'd be a very interesting choice. I'm going to say his name wrong, and he's super huge director, but like somebody like the guy who directed Thor, Takeshi Waititi.
Oh, Taika Waititi?
Taika Waititi. I think he'd be like, he's a huge giant director, but hey, you know what? This is a movie that could be focused on some humor more. I feel like there's a lot of different directors that can come in and do something with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally within his wheelhouse. If he wanted to do Ghostbusters New Zealand, I would totally watch that movie.
Yes. Oh, that's a perfect idea. Something like that would be great.
I'd like to see a guy who hasn't done something in a little while, Joe Cornish, who did a movie called Attack the Block about it in 2011.
Fantastic movie. Yep.
Yeah. And I know he's pre-production on Attack the Block too. I don't know if that's going to come out or not, but he is great at doing comedy and action and has a real unique visual style to what he does. So I'd love to see that guy come back and do something and maybe write it with Jason Reitman. I think that would work out well. We're really swinging for the fences here. I think I would like to see Edgar Wright maybe try to direct one.
Yeah, I was just thinking Edgar Wright.
He'd be perfect. Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's probably not the guy to do that.
You never know. I thought you were going to say Spielberg.
No, I mean, if we're really swinging for the fences, that'd be great. But
Ghostbusters 4 by Steven Spielberg.
If he's not coming back for Indiana Jones 5 or whatever, I think it'd be really hard to get him for Ghostbusters.
Yeah, he ain't coming back for Ghostbusters 4. That's funny. That's a great look right there. He'd be great. Yeah.
What about you, Brad? Who would you like to see?
Well, I was thinking Edgar Wright. And Waititi that's brilliant too, because these are guys who aren't afraid to do stuff that's sort of off the beaten path. Adam Mckay.
Oh yeah,
he's making some big movies though, like some heavy hitting political things. Like he started off in comedies, right? And he'd be interesting. Who's the guy that directed Guardians? I can't think of his name right now.
Oh, James Gunn.
Yeah, James Gunn would probably interject something interesting too. Or you could just, find a young up-and-coming director who's got a couple of things under his belt. That's the thing about this franchise. You could go into the higher direction or you can go into the lower kind of like newer directors.
The fascinating thing I find about James Gunn is I think with the Guardians movies, which I like very much, I think he's so restrained. I think they practically have a muzzle on him. And you saw it with the Suicide Squad, where Suicide Squad is really pure, unadulterated James Gunn, who has a filthy sense of humor and loves shock value and has like a trauma background. He loves to throw some like real gore scares into it. It's like, wow, with Ghostbusters, they would probably have to like sedate him to keep him with that PG-13.
I think the bottom line is that like you could bring any director into this and they could take their take on it. And that's what I think is interesting. And again, that's what Jason said. He's like, I want to see Ghostbuster stories from all over the world. And that's what you do. You get all these different directors. You do Ghostbusters Incorporated, and you do, hey, this is the New Zealand. These are the Ghostbusters from Ireland. These are the Italia Ghostbusters. You could literally go worldwide and have these different stories of them dealing with their gozers, their historical ghosts that they deal with. Or, like imagine a Ghostbusters movie in Scotland of them going around all the beautiful places in Scotland. Like you could go really in a kind of a bigger direction with this too. So it's rife for picking to do what you want.
Also, and I remember there was a great scene or a subplot in Cabin in the Woods where each culture had their own horror story that they were sort of living out, and the difference between American horror and they were sort of had like the 90s version of Japanese horror or Asian horror that was going on. It's like would be sort of interesting. It's like, okay, have the ghost stories of Ireland, the ghost stories of England, and they all have their own little idiosyncrasies, and then watch the Ghostbusters of that land, and then bring in Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, or whoever to have that cameo, sort of the same thing, showing up at the midpoint to help him train or to give him like this extra weapon or whatever. That could be really fun.
I agree.
All right, guys. This has been amazing. I knew this was going to be fun. I literally have been waiting for years to get you two on the same podcast, because the first time I heard about Ghost Heads, I was a Patreon subscriber to Ghostbusters Minute, and you did an episode on Ghost Head.
We did. We like Ghost Head a lot. Yeah. And when you said it, when Ray said at the beginning, he's like, "Oh, that's right. Yeah, Ray. Okay, yeah."
Yeah.
No, it's a great film. I think it's probably my favorite of all the kind of like fandom documentaries that are out there.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I came to that process a little bit later, but I was really proud of that documentary. I thought it really was cool, and we got the whole cast to talk, and it was just really fun. It was a fun documentary for sure. But thanks.
Ray has very quietly just put his finger into a lot of pots, and I'm always surprised, and I've told this story before. Brian Fritz from the late beloved Between the Ropes podcast, he was on, and he was like recommending something cool. He's like, yeah, there's this documentary on Netflix, Bill Murray stories, and it's really great. It's like, have you heard of it? It's like, have I heard of it? It's like, I knew about that documentary before it came out. Ray's my friend. I've mailed him socks.
You did mail me socks, which I wear often, and I listen to my Ghostbusters record often as well.
I was at the shore, and I was at a socks shop. And they had like all different sort of socks. And then there was one with Ghostbusters socks. And it's like, well, Ray needs this.
My wife was like, somebody sending you socks? I was like, yeah. Yep. And I'm going to wear them all the time.
Every 2 years, I send some crazy crap to Ray's house. I found the original vinyl soundtrack to Ghostbusters, and I mailed that to him. And
I have that on my shelf. Yep.
And I love this story too. It's been told before. Like, I found my parents were moving. They were moving from Pennsylvania to Richmond, Virginia, and they were getting rid of all this stuff. And there was like Jane Fonda workout album and Ghostbusters soundtrack. I was like, well, I called Ray, I emailed Ray, like, hey, give me your address. I'm going to send this to you. Do you want this? He's like, how much money am I going to have to pay you for this? I was like, no, we're friends.
Just so you know, I would have taken the Jane Fonda video too.
Yeah. I'm old enough to remember when that was an insane deal, the Jane Fonda workout. And it was like an iconic cover to that album. I was like, oh yeah, it was a weird time. I'm really glad that we were able to do this, and we'll do it again whenever the next Ghostbusters project is announced. And I want to make this a recurring thing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, hopefully it's not 32 years.
Yeah, we'll see if we have 32 years left of Cosmic Geppetto in us. Guys, I need you to plug your pluggables. Ray, start off. What's your next big project?
I run a fan page called Ghostbusters Universe News, and we post all sorts of different pictures and anecdotes and fun stuff related to the Ghostbusters universe. So that's my handle is at Ghostbusters Universe News, at GB Universe News. And work-wise, they just announced we're working on a documentary for Peacock Network about a 3-episode documentary about Barney the Dinosaur, which is coming out next summer on Peacock. So I'm producing that. And I'm currently working on 2 other documentaries, one about Broadway and another one about paranormal. It's a paranormal hybrid show of a paranormal food travel show called Spirits and Spirits with my friend Bob Anderson from the Windy City Ghostbusters, which we shot and we're trying to get that out to some networks for next year.
Oh, that sounds brilliant.
Yeah, he goes around and he's like, he came to my town where I live in Connecticut because it's super haunted, and he was like, let's go to this graveyard. So we had him interview like this famous paranormal investigator. He's like, wow, there's a lot of ghosts here. Hey, where can I get a cheeseburger? So it's like this really cool thing where he's like this really sweet Chicago guy, and he shows up and he's, whoa, so who's buried here? What happened here? And then he's like, where can I get an old fashioned? So it's kind of this really cool hybrid show. So we're working on that too. So, and my production company is called the Oaks Media Group. Yeah, those are my plugs. Thanks for having me, Brad. And Kyle, it was so nice to meet you. I appreciate your Ghostbusters Minute podcast is brilliant. And hopefully we get to chat again soon.
Oh, most def. Thank you for that, Ray. Thank you. And I really look forward to the Spirits and Spirits show, because if there's anything I love, it's booze and booze. So.
Booze and booze. Booze and Booze. That's the other name we were going to call it, but we thought it would sound too much like booze and boobs. So we were like, we can't do that.
Yeah, that's definitely more of a Cinemax After Dark program.
That's a different show. Yeah.
Probably would have an easier time getting that sold, but...
Yeah, probably.
I think actually Stormy Daniels does a paranormal show like that.
Of course she does.
Yeah.
Of course she does. She's our first guest on the show.
Kyle, I need you to plug your pluggables. What do you have going on?
So right now, I'm doing a show called Theme Park This with my friends Brian Green and Scott Corelli with Dueling Genre Productions. You can find it anywhere you listen to any other podcasts, like the Cosmic Geppetto podcast. That is every other week. We basically we build a fake theme park in our minds. We take any sort of IP or idea or concept, and we say, hey, if we were going to make a theme park, what would this ride be like? And then we just do that, and we have a lot of fun guests on. It's a real fun show. If you're into theme parks, that's a fun show. Like Ray had mentioned earlier, thank you for that. Ghostbusters Minute is still out there if you want to listen to it. We just did a new episode of that just on Ghostbusters Afterlife. So every 2 years we come back out of dust it off and do an episode about that. Jurassic Park Minute, Hocus Pocus Minute, and Goonies Minute are all shows that I've been involved with. Those are all found now on the Dueling Genre Network. Pele Media is my company that made those, but the hosting services for that are with our friends at Dueling Genre, so they own the rights to all that stuff now. So I've got to plug those guys, and you can find them out at Patreon duelinggenre.com/support would take you to all their Patreon shows, and they've got a ton of great stuff over there. So, and then from that, I'm kind of winding down a lot of the main podcast stuff I'm going to be doing, but I'll occasionally come on and do great shows like Cosmic Geppetto whenever Brad asks me to. So I guess this will be my new home for all my podcast appearances for the foreseeable future. So
you always have a home here.
Oh, thank you.
Ghostbusters Minute was the first podcast that I guested on.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal for me because so many years ago when I started this and under the old title when we were still Movies at Marvel, and I just thought it was going to be me talking with some friends from college and high school. Jarf suggested you and Kathleen to come on, and we had a great time talking, and then you invited me on to Ghostbusters Minute, and it's like, oh wow, and the world got so much bigger for me. And I've talked about this before, where your lovely wife Kathleen, she came on, and she was the first person from podcast world that I actually met outside of real world.
Yeah.
She was in Baltimore for a meeting. We had a very nice dinner at Nick's Fish House in Baltimore.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it was so good. I actually now work my day job. I work like 2 minutes away from there, and I have eaten there way too much. In this world where it was just supposed to be me talking about Marvel movies with a couple of buddies, and I've talked with such amazing people and developed like real friendships and relationships with you guys where, we talk and email back and forth, not just so I can pester you to be on the show, but because, it's like, hey, there's a pair of socks that I really need. Kyle's wife is going to be in town, and we should have dinner. And it's a real nice thing. And I'm so glad we could do this. And guys, we'll do this again. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Brad.
That wraps episode 247. Big thanks to Kyle Crane. He has been guesting since our early days, and he always has a home here. Also big thanks to Ray Esposito, one of the nicest guys you could ever meet, and I love having him on. He will return. Next time on the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast, to finish out 2021, Honey Badger and her amazing friends reunite to discuss the year that was and the year to come. Till then, in the words of Jarf Harden,
see you in the funny pages.
Subscribe to the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever quality podcasts can be found. Rate and review us while there. Follow us on Twitter at CosmicGPod, and we will follow you back. Unless you're a jerk. We don't follow jerks. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cosmic Geppetto. We love hearing your ideas for upcoming episodes. Email us at cosmicgeppetto@comcast.net.
You thought it would sound too much like booze and boobs?